So last class we started talking about Phylum Arthropoda. So I'm going to go through a couple of the slides we've already went through kind of quickly just so that we can kind of all be on the same page as we work through the rest of the phyla in this unit. So Phyla Arthropoda again is looking at organisms that have body segments. They have bilateral symmetry, they are triploblastic, they are eucoelomates, they are still protostomes, we haven't gotten into deuterostomes yet. They have complete digestion, and they are the most diverse phylum, mainly because of insects. And remember, phylum Mollusca was our second most diverse phylum. Now, last class we already talked about this subphylum Hexapoda. Remember, a subphylum is underneath phylum, so Hexapoda is still in Arthropoda, and there's also classes and families and whatnot under Hexapoda. It's just an additional classification. As you can probably deduce from the name, these are organisms that have 6 legs, and this includes our insects. It also includes some other organisms, but just think of it as insects. And they have 3 main body parts. Again, we talked about the head, so thinking about the region that has all the nerves and all the sensory organs. You have the thorax. This is where wing attachment will be if the organism has wings. It'll also be where leg attachment is. And then the abdomen is what essentially hosts a majority of the organs. Now, we didn't get to see this video last time, so what I'd like you to do is actually pause here before moving on with the lecture to view this video that should be popping up in a moment. It is looking at the dung beetle. So what I'd like you to get out of this video is knowing what a dung beetle is, and it has a really interesting reproductive strategy. So just briefly outline what the dung beetle is doing. So go ahead and pause here in this video, click on this link that's popping on up, and then come on back. So really interesting, this dung beetle. So again, just kind of know the very, very brief life cycle about how the males are attracting the females and what the females are doing with their eggs. The next subphyla we'll talk about is subphyla Mariapoda. So although we didn't talk about this prefix, this myria kind of means multitude or many. So it's almost like poly. So Mariapoda would be many feet, and this is including our centipedes and our millipedes. Now I have a picture down here of both of these because this is a very commonly mistaken organism. You're like, I know it's got a lot of legs, but how many legs does it have? Not to disappoint you, but centipedes, actually some of them no, they actually probably don't. I don't think any of them actually have 100 legs, and millipedes do not have 1,000 legs, but they are relative to one another. And so what I mean by that is centipedes, if you look at their body, you can actually see multiple segments of their body, and on each body segment there's only one pair of legs. So there's one leg here and one leg on the other side. So 2 legs or 1 pair of legs. These guys are the ones that kill you. These are the ones that you find in caves. You actually may not have seen a centipede before because they're typically in environments that you probably haven't been in. On the other hand, what you maybe have seen quite a bit are millipedes. So millipedes, if you look at their individual segments, which are a lot smaller than our centipedes, their individual segments each have 2 pairs of legs, or 4 legs total. So although millipedes don't have 1,000,000 legs or 1,000 legs, and centipedes don't have 100 legs, millipedes do have more legs than centipedes. So although maybe their prefixes isn't entirely accurate, it does help you relatively. And the way I remember these is centipedes will kill you, and millipedes are the cute ones. These are the ones that you might find crawling on the ground, like if you flip over a rock or something. But incredibly important, millipedes are harmless. They will eat, they essentially are decomposers. Centipedes are predators, and a lot of them are poisonous, and they will kill you. So just avoid them. Another subphyla, so we have 2 more that we're going to talk about, is subphylum Crustacea. So this is including our organisms called crustaceans, which you've probably heard that word before, crustacean. So crustaceans have those body segments similar to Hexapoda. You think of Hexapoda having a head, having a thorax, and having an abdomen. However, with Crustacea, they actually only have 2 body segments. They have one segment called the abdomen. This is very similar to what we saw in our Hexapoda. The abdomen is where you're going to find a majority of the organs. But what's different about crustaceans is they have a structure called a cephalothorax. You know cephalo means head, and we know what the thorax is. So the cephalothorax is essentially one segment that includes both the head and the thorax. These guys all share the fact that they have 10 appendages. Some of these appendages may be specialized to do different things, but they have 10 appendages. And this doesn't include our shrimp, our lobsters, roly-polies. So roly-polies, although they're not found in in the water like these other ones, they're also crustaceans. Barnacles, and then also another crustacean, which I don't have a picture of, but because I've used this term quite a lot, are copepods. So I've mentioned these guys quite a bit. These were those microscopic organisms we saw in lab. These were also what we talked about when we were looking at the nematode parasite, the guinea worm, how they infected copepods that people might unintentionally be drinking. So copepods are included in this group as well. So what we can see here at this picture of this lobster is we do have a clear head region, but it's not segmented. It's not like a very separate head and here's the thorax. It's actually all kind of together. They're linked very closely together, which is why we're saying, okay, you know what? It's not a head and thorax. It's a cephalothorax. They're all combined together. And then we still have this traditional abdomen that we saw in Hexapoda. Now, my cool reproductive fact for these guys is actually the barnacle. So you've probably seen barnacles before, but what you probably saw was this part, kind of that almost rock-like structure. Well, with that rock-like structure, it actually has an organism on the inside of it. Barnacles are filter feeders, and so this is actually all of their different appendages and different organs, and what they do is maybe they're on the side of a whale or a sea turtle shell or a boat or a rock, and they'll take out their different feeding appendages and they just filter through the water and are just grabbing food that exists in the water column. But my most favorite fun fact in the animal kingdom, at least for now, is that barnacles have a really large penis. It is the largest penis to body ratio in the entire animal kingdom. And what I mean by that, its penis can reach 9 times the length of a barnacle. So its penis is 9 times its length. And the reason why is because if you think about barnacles, they don't move. Wherever their little shell-like structure lands, that's where the barnacle exists. So if a barnacle wants to reproduce with other barnacles, one thing it could do is it could just release, egg and sperm into the water column. But instead, they actually inseminate the females. But if you're still, and you can't swim over to a female, you can't walk over to a female, essentially your penis needs to be really long so that you can leave sperm to the females that are in that area. So there's actually a video that kind of shows this, and it'll kind of label it within the video. But it's really fascinating because, again, a lot of organisms coped with the fact that they don't move, like oysters and clams, by releasing their reproductive material into the environment. But these guys are like, nah, we'll just have a really big penis and we'll just inseminate things around us. So go ahead and pause here, take a break, go take a look at this video that's popping on up, and then come on back. All right, one more subphylum to talk about, and I'm sure for some of you guys, you're not going to like this one. Some of you have already told me that. Is subphylum Chellis. Chellis includes spiders, so essentially all the spiders that you can think of. It also includes things like scorpions, ticks, and horseshoe crabs. And I know, horseshoe crabs, right? Crab makes you think crustacean. But horseshoe crabs aren't. They're more closely related to spiders. Again, when people started naming all of these organisms, this was before we really had good classification and DNA evidence to really show us what things are related to each other. But instead of calling it the horseshoe spider, we call it the horseshoe crab. So all of these guys are found in subphylum Chellis. These guys, similar to our crustaceans, have a cephalothorax. So if we're looking at this image here, there is the head, but the head kind of goes along with the thorax. There's no two separate segments. We have a cephalothorax. Here you can see that's where the appendages are coming off, so similar to our thorax and when we looked at Hexapoda. The cephalo, or the head part, and then the abdomen being the area with a majority of the organs. Now when you think of spiders, you're like, oh, well, I know how spiders have 8 legs. And within the class that has spiders, they do all have 8 legs. But because subphylum Chellis includes a lot of different organisms, among all of these organisms, some have 8 appendages, some have 10 appendages. So it's kind of a range depending on exactly what organism we're looking at. Now this name, Chellis actually comes from special structures that these organisms have. These organisms in this subphylum have things called chelicerae, hence the name Chellis. And chelicerae are feeding appendages. So think of appendages as, things that come off, whether it's arms, whether it's legs, but these appendages are specifically meant for eating. Now, depending on the organism we're looking at will depend on what exactly those look like. So for example, spiders. If you look at this spider, has 2 huge fangs. Those are actually appendages that have been modified into venomous fangs that the spider will use to strike a prey, inject venom in it, kill that prey, and then consume that prey. But if you look at more docile looking organisms like our horseshoe crab, I know some of you guys looked at this and you're like, that's not docile, that is a predator. They're actually quite calm organisms. At the very, actually right next to their mouth, so this is their mouth right here. Next to their mouth, they have these 2 little itty bitty claws, like really small in comparison to their legs. These little claws literally are for picking things up. They're not that strong, like they can't really kill anything. It's really meant just to pick things up and kind of scoop it into its mouth. They are appendages, they are things coming out of the organism, but they're not used for movement, or they're really just used for feeding. Scorpions, you think of some scorpions or crabs having big claws, those are feeding appendages, those are being used for feeding. So this is not part of, for example, the spider. It doesn't have 6 legs and then 2 feeding appendages. It still has its 8 legs, and then on top of it, it has 2 additional appendages, the chelicerae, that are exclusively used for feeding. So that's where we're going to stop for Phylum Arthropoda. Go ahead, take a break. Maybe you want to fill out that summary table and fill in all of the information from these different subphylums. And then go ahead and continue on to the next phylum.